Soul for a Soul by John Hope. Narrated by John Moe. Chapter 6. The Seance. Augustine swung the heavy door open with a loud creak as Deodatus led Samo by the arm. The barn of St. Thecla's Cathedral stood as it had on the evening of Brother Fide's disappearance, the only light coming from the 2 lamps Augustine and Deodatus carried. Slung over Augustine's shoulder was a bag filled with supplies Samo had gathered before they'd headed here. Upon strangers entering their home, the goats in the upper loft bleated their warning, kicking straw and dust into the air. Samo stopped when he reached the center of the barn, panting. Augustine had borrowed a donkey to transport the old man to the cathedral, and the frail old man had then shuffled slowly through the church grounds. "Do you need to rest?" asked Augustine. No, Samo insisted between huffs. His bushy eyebrows furrowed as he took in the scene. "Such a humble place for a miraculous emergence, isn't it?" "Any less humble than where Christ was born?" Deodatus asked. "Aha," Samo said, waggling his crooked finger at Deodatus. "This one has wit." Augustine placed the bag on the straw-covered ground and opened it. "What do you need from in here, Samo?" "First, close the door. Then take out the furs. Deodatus, you can help me with my clothes." Following Samo's instructions, Augustine closed the door and placed the furs from the bag in front of the old man. Deodatus stripped the old man down to his bare, wrinkled skin. One at a time, Samo wrapped himself in the furs, completing the ensemble with the jackal's skull that he mounted on his head. "Sweep away the straw," he ordered. Augustine and Deodatus grabbed brooms from the far wall and cleared the ground at the barn's center. As they did so, Samo removed candles from his bag and positioned them around the open area. He nudged each candle left and right to get them perfectly arranged. "Should we light them?" Augustine offered. "No," Samo snapped. Augustine stepped back, joining his son along the wall. As the goats above them kicked up more dust, Deodatus whispered to his father, "Do you recognize this ceremony?" Augustine shook his head. The arrangement of candles complete, Samo returned to the bag one last time and removed a pair of strangely shaped scepters. They appeared to be human femurs with an array of smaller bones fused to one end, forming an intricately spiked arrangement that looked part art and part brutal weaponry. "Augustine, Deodatus," Samo commanded, "keep your distance." The pair backed as far from the ring of unlit candles as possible until they were crowded into a small corner of the barn. Samo stepped into the center of the candles, lifted the scepters, and wrapped them together. The sharp noise silenced the goats. "O mentum noctis venit precipimus," he called into the darkness. He slammed the scepters together again. This time, the candles illuminated with blue, flickering flames. Augustine and Deodatus glanced at each other in shock, but immediately returned their focus to Samo's strange seance. The old man went into a dance, hopping from foot to foot, chanting something indiscernible as he dipped and rocked his head, looking unbelievably nimble for a man who could barely make it to the barn a moment ago. A wind rose from nowhere, swirling hay and dirt into the air. Coughing and blinking, Augustine and Deodatus tried unsuccessfully to swat away the flying debris. The flames in their lamps blew out, although the barn remained well lit. As the wind settled slightly, Augustine and Deodatus could see the ring of candles burning blue despite the breeze. "Copias in tenebris," Samo yelled. "Ut vos iubes." He slammed the scepters to the ground. Sparks flew upon the scepter's impact. The scepters leapt into the air, swirling around a metaphysical orb that sparkled like a globe of fireflies. Then the scepters joined, and additional bones grew out of the fusion, piece by piece, until a complete skeleton formed. From bottom to top, the skeleton morphed into a tall, 2-legged creature. The creature formed hooves for feet, a complete spine and ribcage, a pair of bat-like wings extending outward, a pair of arms curled inward, and finally a deformed skull emerged with the double pair of goat horns. With another gust of wind, a swirl of sparks engulfed the skeleton, layering the bones with shiny green skin. The wind subsided, and there stood the most gruesome creature Augustine and Deodatus had ever seen. It was completely green, except for its fat red lips, brown horns, and serpent-like yellow eyes. White fangs curved upward from the sides of its mouth. "Foolish mortals," the creature said, its voice smooth and hollow. "How dare you conjure me to this wretched dominion?" "Demon," Samo replied confidently, "we've requested your presence to determine the fate of one brother, Fides Albarello, whom we believe you held for a brief time." The demon spat. "I still have his awful taste in my mouth." Samo squinted. "So you did take this man?" "Yes," the demon hissed. "You waste my time, mortal. Return me, or I will take you as well." "Please," Samo raised his hands. "We request an answer. Why did you return Brother Fides?" The creature crept toward Samo. "I wish not to say. Now return me, or suffer a death worse than life. You know well, Samo, how deep pain can feel." Samo stammered, his confidence rattled. Augustine approached from out of the shadows. "We ask because we believe you may have been lied to." The demon turned toward Augustine. "Lied? Who would dare lie to me?" "Brother Fides might have, convinced you of something that was, let's say, cloaked in a lie." No, the demon seethed. "There was no lie. There was simply a mistake interpreting the ledger." "The ledger?" Augustine asked. The demon rotated his hands, and a giant book materialized in it. "The Book of Vices," the demon replied, opening the book. "Look here. The ledger lists Fides Albarello. His name once glowed red, so I seized the mortal from this very place. However, the creature flattered me, so I listened. The mortal noted that Fides means truth, or deliverer of truth, and that he was only listed herein to convey the truth of a young sapling, or as translated into your tongue, an albarello." "An albarello?" Augustine echoed. "Yes," the demon hissed. "The mortal fulfilled his role. This deliverer of truth, Fides, called out an albarello, Olmo, and shared with me the boy's sins of self-gratification." Augustine grasped at Brother Fides' evil cleverness, twisting both of his names to create an illusion of innocence. He recalled when Bishop Lafredo introduced Fides to Augustine. Lafredo had insisted they'd have a lot to talk about since both used to be teachers. Throughout his career, Augustine had picked up on nuggets of information, which he enjoyed sharing with his pupils. Conversely, Fides had used his own experience to outwit a demon and sacrifice a young boy in the process. "That's a lie!" Deodatus yelled from behind Augustine. Augustine waved his hand to hush his son, but Deodatus ignored him. "That bastard practically destroyed Olmo," he said, marching forward. "Do you know how long it will take him to get over what happened? Never. That's how long." He stared the demon in the eye. "Just how many children does Brother Fides have to molest?" "How many?" Augustine asked. "Who else do you?" Deodatus stared at him. "Me." Silence fell over the barn. Augustine gaped at his son, who seemed shocked at his own admission. He went at me first." Deodatus rubbed his face. And, as Olmo likely did, I begged him not to. But he convinced me that it was God's will that he cleanse me of my sinful desires. Then he told me it was all my fault. And I believed him. I never considered that a man of God would lie. He took a breath. After about the third time, I tried to convince myself it was what I wanted. It was who I was. So I let it happen. For weeks. Then, months. He shivered. Oh, dear Lord. Swiping at tears, Augustine pulled his son into an embrace. My poor, poor child, he said, rubbing Deodatus's back. The demon hissed. This is disgusting. Augustine looked over Deodatus's shoulder at the creature. You wouldn't understand the love of a father. I haven't any need for it. The demon spun toward Samo. Now, return me to my dominion, or I will consume you all. But demon, Augustine said, easing from his son, you've heard the lies Brother Fide has conveyed. You should seize his soul, not Olmo's. The demon's beady eyes gazed down on Augustine. And I shall retake Fide's albarello, the being concurred. You needn't fear of that. However, Olmo's fate is sealed. His soul is no longer within my control. What do you mean? Asked Augustine. When I consume a mortal soul, he remains in purgatory until such time that he descends to hell. But alternatively, I may choose to send him to the Neither. The what? Augustine asked. The Neither, Samo said. It's a secondary place, cold and friendless, devoid of all life, of all hope. It's neither purgatory nor hell. The Neither. Correct, mortal, hissed the demon. I was so annoyed at having to revisit this dominion that when I vomited Fide's albarello and consumed the boy, I sent him directly to the Neither. Once a soul is there, I have no recourse to reacquire it. All I have left of your friend is his face. The demon angled its narrow frame and pointed its hind end toward Augustine and Deodatus. Its butt twisted and morphed itself into the likeness of Olmo's soft face. Eyes closed, mouth open. Olmo? Deodatus gasped. It is only an impression of the young mortal, the demon replied. Once I transcend a soul, I'm indelibly scarred by its revolting inner beauty, a personal reminder to me of the life I've purloined. But are you forced to do this? Augustine asked. Who is your master? The demon narrowed its yellow eyes. Who else? Augustine stiffened his lip, needing not say the name of Satan. But for this child, the demon continued, his soul is forever in the Neither. That is not true, Samo said with regained confidence. Do you defy me, mortal? Challenged the demon. According to Enoch's writings, travel to and from the Neither can be done by a willing soul if he is not yet carved in red within the Book of Vices. The demon smiled. There has never been a soul willing, and I doubt there ever shall be. Besides, it's beyond a soul's fortitude to resist the eternal pull of the Neither. There, a soul resides in its personal hell. The Neither's force will never allow a return, certainly not the return of two souls. I'll go, Deodatus said. The demon spun around. What? Take me. Augustine grabbed his son's arm. No, Deodatus, you don't know what you're saying.
Listen to your father, boy, the demon said. No one ever returns from the Neither.
I will. Augustine yanked Deodatus's arm. Don't, Deodatus, you're too young. You have no experience. Deodatus hesitated, and the demon's mouth drew into a smile. Augustine looked quizzically between the two of them.
Ah, yes, boy.
The demon flipped through several pages in the book.
Perhaps you do know about such transgressions.
He pointed to a name, this one in dark maroon.
Your name, Audiodatus, had nearly changed to fiery red. You were almost mine.
What such transgressions? Augustine demanded. He grabbed his son's shoulder. What is he talking about? Deodatus lowered his head in shame. It was in the past. I... Deodatus, Augustine pleaded. What did you do? Deodatus tensed, his body like a pot on a stove ready to boil over. I did it too, he burst out. He backed away from his father, shaking his head violently to deny the memory. I became the hunter. I lured other boys to private places around the cathedral. I went from altar boy to altar boy, consuming them. He raised a tear-streaked face to his father. I hated myself, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. Tears flowed down his chin. Augustine's face was frozen in horror. But you did stop, he ventured cautiously. Didn't you? Deodatus wiped his face and nodded. It was Emilio, a curly-haired child who'd been an altar boy for only a couple months. He whimpered the entire time. And afterwards, he asked me, why? Why did I do it? Deodatus shook his head. I didn't have an answer. Augustine stared, speechless. The innocence of his son, the child he used to know, was gone. He still loved the boy with all of his heart, but no matter how much he tried to ignore the feeling, he knew he could never look at Deodatus the same way again. Oh, Deodatus, he muttered at last. Augustine spun to Samo, his eyes pleading. The old man shrugged. I may be able to summon a portal, but not knowing where Olmo is, I wouldn't know how to focus the opening. So, Augustine began. Someone would need to go, affirmed Samo. But his name. Augustine struggled to piece his words together. It's already in the Book of Vices. Doesn't that disqualify him? The demon said, His name has not yet glowed red. He qualifies. Father, Deodatus said, you made a promise to give your life to the Lord. So have I. And saving Olmo will allow me to fulfill that promise. Augustine cupped his mouth. Oh, dear Lord. You know I'm right. Deodatus awaited his father, his eyes glassy and red. A million thoughts and emotions rushed through Augustine. The tiny infant placed in Augustine's arms the first time he held his son. The nights the young boy lay beside him as Augustine shared stories of gallant warriors slaying sea creatures to get him to sleep. The bruised knees and scuffles with other children, and the days they worked in the garden together. The hours of prayer, Deodatus's commitment to God and the church, and now, Deodatus's willingness to sacrifice himself for another. Yes, you are. Augustine inhaled deeply. We all fall short in the eyes of God. I'm certainly no exception. It's our sins that carve the scars that we learn to navigate. And with God's love, Deodatus urged, how can I fail?